February 19th, 2010. 2 months after a new Wake County School Board is sworn in, and just 2 days after the school system superintendent announced his resignation.
That has become very important to me, to make sure that we give every kid that opportunity. And then there's another side to it, this old selfish as a taxpayer. I think we should do things as fiscally responsibly as possible. And our system is a great example of this. That's one of the least expensive methods for educating all kids. It costs a heck of a lot more money to provide support and resources for kids in schools where there are very high concentrations of poverty. And the research that I've been reviewing for a number of years in schools that have high levels of poverty, it is a difficult challenge to keep highly qualified teachers in those buildings, to attract talented, creative, hard-driving principals to help kids learn. But you can't sustain that.
You're going to have a higher cost to retain employees at the segregated schools. Ultimately, as I was discussing earlier, at a predominantly African-American, predominantly poor school, you're going to have to pay teachers. Either you're going to have low-quality teachers, or to get high-quality teachers, you're going to have to spend 25-50% more to get them there. So it just doesn't make sense to pay teachers extra money when you could pay them all the same and have integrated schools.
March 23rd, 2010. After dismantling the 10-year-old Wake County Public School System student diversity policy, the Wake School Board prepares to adopt a resolution establishing a directive for the community-based, or better known as neighborhood school, assignments.
Mr. Mojas?
Yes.
In that we have heard a great deal today about budget, I think it's exceedingly important that we have some kind of an idea about cost assessment, the fiscal obligations that we'll incur. So I would like to add an amendment looking at the cost assessment.
Well, as a former principal, I know the importance of finances and budget. And as the budget is cut, so is the ability of the principal at their schools to provide services to their kids and their teachers. The last couple of years, we've lost $100 per pupil in spending has been cut from our budget. Times $140,000, that's a whole lot of dollars. I think it's vitally important that at the outset of any plan that you put together, that you have to flesh out the infrastructure of that plan and then look at the associated costs. Because my concern is we will, as a board, develop a plan without paying attention to the fiscal details. And then when we try to implement that plan, we won't have the funding to take care of those high-poverty schools that may be created, let alone take care of all of our schools.
Be it hereby resolved, prior to the adoption of the final approved model, the board shall review a full assessment of all costs, including transportation, educational tools, and personnel, including teachers, to implement the proposed student assignment plan, including any additional expenses associated with the creation of high-poverty schools. I think if we're going to take care of our fiduciary responsibilities, this is something that we need to build into this resolution.
I know that Mr. Tedesco has said publicly several times there may be as many as 15 to 17 new high-poverty schools to result from the kind of plan that he and the Student Assignment Committee were looking at. And that concerns me because just like in Charlotte, where they dedicated a tremendous amount of money to their high-poverty schools that arose as a result of their plan. In the last 2 years, they're cutting money almost as fast as they added it to those schools.
With the extra expenses related to schools of concentrations of poverty, in case we should have those, and I think we will, I think we're going to need more money, so we need to be sure that we have sufficient funding.
I think we heard tonight that that teachers staying in these high-poverty schools are going to cost between $15,000 and $20,000 more than other teachers. So I think the financial challenges of this proposal are certainly something that we need to consider.
On Mr. Hill's motion pertaining to cost assessment, Ms. McLaurin. Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Tedesco?
No.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Goldman?
No.
Mr. Malone?
No.
Ms. Prickett?
No.
Mr. Sutton?
Yes.
Ms. Morrison?
Yes.
Okay. Chair will vote no.
I think it was Winston Churchill that said that failure to plan is a plan to fail.
So now, over 7 months later, what will be the cost and the consequences of neighborhood schools in Wake County? Under federal court-ordered desegregation since 1970, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Public School System embraced student diversity until 2001, when another federal court decision forced Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools to adopt a neighborhood schools policy. Since then, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools has racially resegregated its schools, creating a dearth of low-achieving, high-poverty schools in the inner city. The resulting costs have been substantial. Older schools are being closed to pay bond debt for newer facilities. Hundreds of teachers and staff have been laid off. Needed programs and services have been cut. The local economy and real estate market are suffering.
One of the main things were bonds. One of the reasons that we're having a lot of struggle right now is because with the growth of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, which became around 2,500 students a year. Y'all understand that because you got to 3,500, and that plus the need for equity. But the problem with that, of course, is the economy went downhill, and we have bond indebtedness that is still creeping up, which takes away then from the money that we have to spend for our day-to-day operation of the schools. Wake County has a tremendous advantage over other similar school systems because you've been able to keep reasonable free and reduced lunch percentage and diversity in your schools through this plan.
What began as school choice in Charlotte almost 10 years ago, today is a quagmire of have and have-not schools that has impacted the housing market.
Throughout the Charlotte area, the schools play a very, very important part in the sometimes the decline of a neighborhood or sometimes the acceleration of prices. Homes in neighborhoods that have lower performing schools and the test results are right there for the public to see take a longer time and they sell for less than homes in areas where the school is more affluent and has higher test scores.
We were really disturbed with the changes in Charlotte schools. We didn't like seeing, the have schools and the have-not schools. And here was this school in our neighborhood that had become a high-poverty school, in part because people in our part of the neighborhood didn't pick it, because they sent their children to wealthier schools, whether they were magnets or whether they moved or whether they sent their kids to private schools. It's a kind of uncertainty, and I think a lot of people in Charlotte feel uncertain. I think there was this thought that going back to neighborhood schools would make things more sure and certain, and that then you'd know where your child went to school. But the problem, again, being because there's this volatility based on which schools are seen as good and which schools are seen as not as good, and that means people moving around, and then that means having to change boundaries. I don't think in a lot of communities that you've seen that kind of stability that people had hoped for.
For many students, the environment in which they're educated is much less diverse, particularly economically, but also from a ethnic standpoint. We paid more for teachers to create smaller class size in those schools because research shows that is a key factor in the schools actually children succeeding. So when you have extra teachers, you're talking about $50,000, $60,000 for every teacher.
In a low poverty school, the school that I worked at, they had parents who committed to giving a large sum of money to the school. And the balance of that was they had banks who would partner with schools and would add to the money that was given to the school. So we had more money than we knew what to do with. Now, in a high poverty school, you're talking about parents who struggle to give 15 cents to buy ice cream.
Now when I speak with people about the area, school is a factor that is detrimental to the area. Yes, I have seen panic buying and selling in the neighborhoods.
And you can see that the overwhelming number of high poverty schools had way more new teachers than any school would need to be successful. What you want are teachers who will stay at the schools, who are successful teachers, who are experienced teachers, and they will stay and mentor the new teachers coming in, and also will be there so that as parents, people in the community can say, go to that school because I know those teachers are there and they taught my children and they're good teachers. But many of our high poverty schools have had complete turnovers.
If you want your school to succeed, if you want children to succeed in life, they have to learn and understand each other.
As people begin to feel there's such a difference in schools, it just creates more divisiveness. And I think that the sense of building community that many people have in Wake County is so important to the development of North Carolina and to our region. And I hope that folks in Wake will say, hey, we've got something valuable. We really can create the school system that works, the model for the nation. And that's why people are moving here. We want that to continue that way. And I hope you will recognize what you have before you lose it.